welcome to Flagship Lite. My name's Nidlan, and today we're again joined by Anuj, and we'll be talking about passwords and verification.
So we'll start off by talking about authentication methods that are used now. One of the most standard ones are password and pins. I'm pretty sure all of us use them on phones, every website. Pins are much more easier and quicker because they tend to be just 4 digits or 6 digits. So you just punch them in, but with passwords you want them to be long with different characters and symbols, so it takes quite a long time to write passwords out. So pins are a little less secure than passwords.
Yeah, there's also like the drag feature for certain passwords. I know that lots of Android phones, especially like the older ones, have the drag where they have, I think it's 16 dots. You can drag it along to make a shape that you would like using the pins. You just have to repeat that pattern as soon as you log into your device. There's also Fingerprint and Face ID. These are implemented in some of the newer devices, but they have been here for quite some time. Apple have introduced both of them. Most Android companies now use Face ID and fingerprints for their flagship devices, but for like the mid-range and maybe budget devices, you'll maybe see Fingerprint ID the most. So like with the passwords and pins, they're the standard really. Like they're easy, they're quick to use, but they're also easy to forget, and it's sort of the same thing with pins, although not to the same extent, of course. With the drag that I was talking about, the dragging to the pins thing, they're also extremely simple and easy to do, but it's also easy for others to see it and get it as well. So for example, I don't know, if you're in a bus and the person behind you can see your phone, then it's quite easy to remember the dragging patterns, which is an obvious downside.
With the Face ID, almost every new iPhone has it, and almost all of the Androids, as you said. And the Apple Face ID has a 1 in a million error rate, so that's quite a low chance of it, failing. So that's good to know. But with COVID-19, when people are trying to unlock their phone with masks on, it pretty much didn't recognize any of the owners. I think they introduced a software update to patch that, but it showed its weaknesses.
Surely that makes it less secure then, because as far as I'm aware, Apple has been keeping Face ID as their main form of verification since the iPhone 10, I think, when they ditched the physical fingerprint button. So when like COVID came around and everyone was wearing masks, like the whole chunk of verification from your face was taken out, so obviously you couldn't see like your nose or your mouth, and those are like key points in identifying someone's faces according to Apple's algorithm anyway. So I think that with COVID-19 they've really struggled with their verification, because like their passwords and their pins are the only ways you can log in. Before they had Fingerprint ID, which was useful, but now, once they've removed that, I think they've struggled quite a bit.
By updating it to recognize you with your mask on, I don't know how they can do that by just looking at your eyes, because if they're somehow reducing its security, that's not good for Apple users. Like, they're just making the phone more like susceptible to being unlocked by someone that isn't the owner.
Yeah, I think it is quite risky, but I assume it would maybe work similar to Samsung's iris scanner. The one they introduced like a few years back, but then completely ditched. I think it'd be something based on that, but obviously a bit more advanced. But yeah, like you said, I don't think it will be extremely secure compared to like Face ID, which Apple have been developing for years on years now.
The fingerprint reader is quick. All you have to do is put your thumb or your finger on the reader, and it reads it in like a split second. And even with new updates, the fingerprint reader still is slightly faster than the Face ID, but the display is going to be smaller because you have to have a completely separate fingerprint reader unless it's in the screen.
Yeah, just a quick question. Where do you prefer the fingerprint sensor? Do you think it's better on the back, on the side, like the Samsung S20e, or on the front as like an in-display fingerprint reader?
I'm used to putting my thumb at the bottom, but like now that I think about it, it's really awkward to have your thumb down at the bottom. So I'd say either on the back of the phone or like in the middle of the screen.
Yeah, I think lots of companies have maybe fallen into the trap, I guess, of putting their fingerprint scanners like at the far ends of the phone. So, example, I know I used to have a phone that had a fingerprint scanner, and the fingerprint scanner was like quite near the top, and I had to stretch a bit to put my finger on it, of course. And then the same with like in-display fingerprint scanners, where the actual scanning area is a bit like below where you're used to. I would prefer it nearer the middle, I guess. So now that we've talked a bit through that, we'll move on to some of the new methods of verification, which when I looked at, they were extremely weird but interesting as well. So the first one is LG's vein verification. Yes, it recognizes your veins. So LG has a camera that detects a user's veins with infrared light and uses like a 3D time-of-flight camera on the front as well, which detects like the shape, thickness and other characteristics on your palms, which can like give an indication about the structure of your veins and whether it's actually you. This is actually implemented on the LG G8, and I'm not sure if they're continuing this. I mean, LG have a habit of introducing a really cool feature and then completely dropping it, like without a second thought. But yeah, so they introduced it on the LG G8, and compared to like fingerprint and Face ID, it was a bit slower. I mean, obviously, maybe because it was first gen, but also because it has a huge area to scan. Like, it has to scan your whole palm to check your veins.
The good thing about vein verification is when you're unlocking the phone, most phones have Face ID nowadays. So you either have to, like awkwardly angle your face at the phone so that it can recognize you, or you have to pick your phone up and lift it to your face. But with vein verification, all you have to do is just stick your hand over the phone and it will read it.
Yeah, I guess that when a phone is on a flat surface, it'd be a bit more useful. So like if you had a phone with fingerprint ID and you wanted to unlock it while it was resting on a table, for example, you'd have to lift the phone and then put your finger to the fingerprint scanner. It'd be a bit of a hassle. But then if you had Face ID, you'd have to like awkwardly hover your face over the scanner whilst it takes some time to recognize you, etc, etc. But with vein verification, all you really have to do is hover your hand over. But like in general purposes, when you're like pulling your phone out of your pocket and then putting your hand up to it, I don't see how it could be extremely useful.
Your natural reaction to vein verification would be, that's a little overkill. But even when you consider like how useful it could be, scanning your veins just isn't, practical. You'd rather scan things that are, I guess, more accessible than your veins.
Yeah, exactly. It is a nice idea. I'll give LG that, but it does seem quite strange, I guess, for a piece of verification. And they've also included Face ID and Fingerprint ID on the LG G8, which includes this verification. So, strange move, but definitely a very interesting method.
Spoken passwords aren't really used that much on phones, but some researchers have found a way to recognize your lips while you speak the passcode. They look at the shape of your lips, the texture, and how your lips move, and it's called voice gesture. And this, like the vein verification, sounds a little overkill, but if you think about it, it's quite smart because no one else can really speak like you in terms of, your lip shape and its texture. So it seems quite secure, actually.
Yeah, although if you're saying your password out loud, then I guess it could be a slight issue. But say, for example, if you're just mouthing like a word for your password, then I guess it could be useful. But you have to take into account like people's lips could change, or like the shape of their mouth could change as well. So these algorithms have to be really accurate, because like Face ID, for example, I don't know, if you take off your pair of glasses, for example, and you scan your face, then Face ID should still work theoretically. So I think that if their algorithm is thoroughly developed and they have found out a way to, filter out all the stuff that could change about you, that could make it seem like someone else is speaking, then I think it could be quite useful. Like, it also eliminates the need to awkwardly hold the phone in front of your face for face verification or stuff like that. So I do think it could be quite useful.
Although it doesn't just listen to the sound of your voice, it has to look at your lips. So I think it might be similar to Face ID in terms of having to lift your phone up or angle your face to the phone.
Okay, so now we'll move on to the ear recognition app. So an Android app was developed by Descartes Biometrics, and it's called the Ergo Android app. And so when your ear is pressed against the screen, the point where it makes contact with the glass are mapped out and then put through an algorithm and compared to an ear print that you've already done yourself. So if they match, of course, the user will be logged in. And obviously, like Face ID, it requires a lot of scans, so it can work out the best angles and obviously double check that it's actually you whose ear print is matched with the ear that you're logging in with.
I think one problem with this is that I don't want to press my ear against the screen of my phone, because it's just not something that you would normally do, apart from if you're taking a call but you only touch like the top part. But pressing your entire ear against the glass of your phone seems quite odd to me.
Yeah, it just seems a bit unnatural, I guess. Yeah, so like research has been done and it's shown that your fingerprints evolve over time, and like similar studies have been done with ear shapes as well, and they found out that the shape of your ear doesn't change nearly as much as your fingerprint would. This is obviously a huge bonus, as you don't have to keep on redoing all of your verification again. So I honestly think that this could be more secure, and probably out of the three we've looked at is the most realistic, I guess. For some time now, researchers have been looking at identifying gaits and using it as a piece of verification. So, for example, this could be implemented in smartwatches and also like other devices in offices, for example, specialized floors that can sense pressure as well. These can be quite useful because fitness trackers don't usually have pieces of verification attached to them. Like, you wouldn't find a fingerprint scanner or Face ID in a watch. So easy stuff like this would be extremely useful for smartwatches, especially as more people start using them. So using the existing sensors in the smartwatch and the right software, of course, watches can identify your gait and then like compare it to previous mappings and stuff, and recognize if it's you. So as I said, this can be implemented in offices with special floors that sense pressure, and I think this is really interesting. And because you can't actually see your gait as such, I think it could be quite useful and would be extremely hard to hack into.
Gait recognition can obviously be used on smartwatches, but if you think about it, vein recognition would also be quite well suited to smartwatches because they're right up against your wrist. But I guess it would be hard to fit that, technology inside of a small thing like a smartwatch.
Yeah. That being said, though, like components are getting smaller, and we could start seeing some more advanced stuff as well.
Yeah, and as smartwatches are able to measure your steps and like using your stride length to figure out how far you're going, I think it's definitely possible to figure out who's walking with the watch using their gait.
So now that we've looked at some other pieces of verification, let's talk about the apps that can help with passwords. So one is called LastPass, which is a password manager. It stores your passwords so you don't have to remember any of them, and it autofills them for you. So if you go onto your laptop or computer or whatever, you can go onto the Chrome browser, or I think you can go onto other browsers as well, and get the LastPass extension. So you can store your passwords there. You can create new passwords using their generator, and it will autofill all of your passwords for you. So for example, if I went into my Gmail now and saved my password for LastPass, and then say an hour later I came back and logged on to my Gmail, my username and my password would be automatically logged in by LastPass. So I've used this personally, and it's extremely simple, secure, and it's very useful as well. Like, I've forgotten passwords on multiple occasions, as I mentioned previously, and this is a huge benefit.
I think lots of phones and laptops have it built in where you save all of your passwords to a browser or the device, and whenever you go on a website, all of that information is stored there for you. Because whenever I go on a website, I always forget the password, so I end up using forgot password. But now pretty much every single website that I use, it has everything auto-filled in, which is quite useful because I want all the passwords to be different, so I don't want to have to remember each and every one.
That being said though, just like saving it onto your Chrome browser, it's probably less safe, even though it is less hassle, compared to a separate app like LastPass, because they obviously are suited to this and have much better security than Chrome, for example. There's less chance that you'd be hacked. A similar app called Dashlane does the same thing. Those two are usually compared to each other and are like the top of the password managing pieces of software that people use today. So definitely do check them out. I'll leave a link down below. There's another one called Diceware as well, so it helps you to create passwords. And because apparently humans find it very difficult to remember long strings of random letters and numbers, which is like the ideal password, so like a random mix of capital letters, symbols, letters, numbers, etc. Humans like struggle to remember this stuff, so we need a password that ideally is easy to remember but is complex as well. So like phrases relating to your pet or your favorite food, etc. Aren't very secure, of course. So when you go onto Diceware, you can pick a number of dice rolls, and Diceware rolls that number of dice and joins them together to get a number, and this number corresponds to one word. The cycle happens a few times depending on what you've inputted. Diceware joins up all of the words to give you a very long but very memorable password. So I've used it as well, and apparently it's the most secure method out there, and it's very useful as well, which are still quite easy to remember. And then obviously you can input like some numbers here and there and add some symbols as well, and there you have a password which is extremely secure and very long but still memorable as well. So I think that Diceware, if you have lots of passwords that you need to change, for example, Diceware is great and obviously can be used in conjunction with the other apps we've mentioned, so Dashlane and LastPass.
There was a website that worked with Dashlane called howsecureismypassword.net, and you would type in your own password, and it doesn't save it, you don't have to click a button, but each time as you add a letter, it will tell you how long it would take a computer to crack that password. So ideally you want to keep going until you reach like a couple thousand of years, if you want it to be, just something that's hard to crack, and it'll tell you, the strength of your password.
Yeah. So obviously we'll link these down below, so if you do want to check them out, we definitely recommend you to, because they are extremely useful and we've used all of them as well. So that's about that. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.